This is Movietone. Jeffrey Sumner reporting.
The sun literally rises in the east over the Somnolent Airport in Bahrain. Here in January 1976, British Concorde touched down on the world's first ever supersonic commercial flight and made aviation history. They were champagne days for Concorde. There was a queue to fly in the most exciting aircraft the world had ever seen. Concorde's battles for world recognition were only beginning. But for the flying public, the pencil-slim beauty lacked only one thing: wide-ranging routes to fly on. The Middle East was conquered. The Middle West and the rest of America had yet to be won over. Concorde didn't really begin on a drawing board. It evolved out of one of the most exciting innovations of the 50s, the British Comet. Comet was the world's first turbojet airliner, and Movietonews was there when the first passenger service was inaugurated on May the 2nd, 1952. Takeoff point London, destination by way of Rome, Beirut, Khartoum, Entebbe and Livingston was Johannesburg, South Africa. But the long road to Comet and Concorde, the beginning of serious global air travel, started with the first flight of a magnificent long-ranging aircraft in November 1930. The Handley Page 4-engine biplane, the Hannibal. A 100-mile-an-hour cruising speed, a 300-mile range seemed puny now, but the Hannibal was big, roomy, and gave superb comfort to its 24 passengers. It put Imperial Airways on the map. The Scylla class, a variation of the Hannibal, added its weight to Imperial Airways' growing prestige. Both flight and turnaround were fast. Could this have been the foretaste of things to come? Passengers didn't lounge about either. To many at boardroom and technical level, the answer to really long-range service was one of the most graceful aircraft of the day. C-class flying boats like the Caledonia were used on Empire routes. They could carry 24 passengers, 2 tons of mail.
The war over, great changes were expected in air travel
and were taking place. In July 1950, the first 4-turbo prop aircraft flew into the picture, the Vickers Viscount V630, setting in motion the first scheduled passenger flights in gas turbine airliners. The flight path was opening for the turbojet. It was time for Comet. Comet 1, powered by 4 de Havilland Ghost 50 turbojets, cruising speed just under 500 miles an hour, was the start of something really new: passenger jet travel. Many other aircraft have been tried and proved, like the famous Trident. What everybody half expected, but was convinced could never really happen, the advent of a huge wide-bodied jet, the Boeing 747, with room for hundreds. But for a needed fast service, Concorde was the only answer. America still needed convincing. In her Silver Jubilee year, the Queen, accompanied by the Duke, showed her own complete confidence in this beautiful aircraft when she flew home from Barbados after her Jubilee tour. Her Majesty's delight with the trip was evident. Then they opened, if not the floodgates, at least the first trickles of hope for Concorde's career. A New York clearance gave legal sanction. Concorde was on her way. First flighters to Kennedy included trade union leader Hugh Scanlon. The famous nose, sense of victory that a few weeks ago seemed defeat. With the skies clear to New York for supersonic flight, it's felt the rest of the world will go Concorde. Time of departure from Heathrow, 10:29. Expected time of arrival at Kennedy Airport, just 3 hours, 23 minutes from now. a transatlantic record for passenger air travel. A few decades ago, jet travel was thought to be impossible for passengers, even probably dangerous in the extreme. The velocity of sound, escalating to Concorde's regular speed, Mach 2, twice the speed of sound, a thought that may have terrified the 1930s. Now it's recognized as a quick, clean, comfortable way to cross oceans and continents. Less than 3.5 hours from the runways of London's Heathrow, Manhattan's famous skyline lifts out of the ocean. Kennedy Airport prepares for its controversial visitor.
French Concorde, which left Paris on a synchronized arrangement
With its British counterpart, lands first. Then British Concorde, commanded by Captain Brian Walpole. Both planes report a smooth and enjoyable flight. As for noise and pollution, even Concorde's fiercest critics don't have much to say. Expected demonstrations from noise abatement societies in New York fail to appear. Concorde's performance obviously pleased her crew. 25 years after the first jet passenger service lifted off, the world's most beautiful jetliner is ready for supersonic travel anywhere. At the turn of the century, future aviators got into quite a flap over the flying caper. These old films from Movietonews library show how determined they were. It may be a laugh to us nowadays, but to the intrepid flyers, it was all grimly serious. Fit a pair of wings and pedal like mad. Oi, mind my bike.
To send a greeting to my numerous friends and invite them to take a trip with me over the beautiful Switzerland.
British Movietonews takes you for an air ride over the Swiss Alps in the Graf Zeppelin. These are the first sound pictures made on board this giant of the skies. After a bell signal from the commander, the motors are started and we're off.
Was hat wie das Schiff?
1 Grad schwer.
1 Grad schwer. Ja.
You are witnessing a flight of the Graf Zeppelin in the Swiss mountains.
I'm telling a story.
And the mountains which you see just now passing by are the Kurfürsten, chain of mountains near the Sentis.
Memories of past glory take wing at the Shuttleworth Collection flying demonstration at Biggleswade, Bedfordshire. In the foreground, a German V-bomber. The Hawker Tomtit is designed 44 years ago and in service with the RAF in the early 30s. The 1924 DH-51 Miss Kenya, restored by Hawker Siddeley apprentices. A 1917 Bristol fighter which served with the RAF in Turkey immediately after World War I. A German Fiesler-Storch spotter and general reconnaissance plane are the type used by the Germans in an unsuccessful attempt to rescue Mussolini from a British mountain hideaway. A Percival Promise, one of the last in service with the RAF and used by the Central Air Traffic Control School at Shawbury. A reproduction 1915 French Moran, a fighter plane. The DH-60, an early version of the Tiger Moth trainer. Like old soldiers, old aeroplanes never die. They fly again with the Shuttleworth Collection.
Aviation, the miracle of the 20th century, looses a new sensation on the world, the composite plane which splits in the air. You have met the Maya before. You have met the Mercury. You have been introduced to their two courageous test pilots, Parker on the left and Piper. And you have seen the two planes fly together as a composite craft. But never yet, before the release of this film, have you witnessed a genuine picture of the actual parting. There's a slight mist on the Medway, but grand conditions up above, on the day when the Short Mayo people carry out their promise to repeat for press and newsreel the experiment which they successfully achieved in secret a fortnight earlier. So sit back and watch the amazing phenomenon and enjoy the suspense of waiting for it. All over in a few seconds, fewer in fact than it took to see it, for that was slow motion taken by Jack Cotter. Aerodynamics separate the planes after the levers have been released, and the lower machine Maya dips and sweeps downward to the river. But what happens to Mercury? We'll join the two craft together again and watch the parting with big lenses from the ground. Mercury soars aloft, and with the two planes diverging naturally, it seems that the risk of accident in Major Mayo's invention must be small. Listen to the triumphant sound of the engines as they roar past. The separation is achieved by two levers. The pilot of the lower machine sits at his wheel. Then, after a telephone conversation with his partner, he pulls down his release lever. But still the machines are locked. Not until the pilot of the upper machine moves his lever are they ready to be disengaged. And even then they fly on together until aerodynamics separate them. Watch the performance again from a distant view, such as the human eye at Rochester might have seen. When the levers have been released, a very light is fired as a signal to the cameras, and then the wind and gravity do the rest. Only the future can disclose the benefits of this spectacular invention. Its potentialities are obvious for long-distance flights. It may have other applications, opening a new and fascinating prospect in the realm of aviation.
Britain's first vertical takeoff machine, the Flying Bedstead, was tested recently at the Rolls-Royce flight establishment in Nottinghamshire. The pilot sits on a platform above the two Rolls-Royce Nene jet engines, which discharge vertically downwards, forcing the bedstead into the air. It may look like an optical illusion, but this thing is really flying. 3.5 tons in weight, it's controlled by a compressed air jet and those long arms. The bedstead will be used to study the problems of vertical takeoff and landings on, which may be applied in the future to high-speed aircraft.
export in 1971 with an even more powerful engine, we expect to sell at least 1,000 of them and possibly even equal the 2,000 record set by the Hunter.
Members of Parliament and aeronautical scientists went to London Airport the other day for a trip in the Brabazon. Lord Brabazon, after whom it's named, of course, and Mr. Strauss, Minister of Supply, were in the party. This was one of the first major passenger-carrying flights by the huge Brab, and in the capable hands of Bill Pegg and his co-pilot, Walter Gibb, the aircraft behaved perfectly. What the machine's future is to be was still in doubt, but presumably it's bound to be something more than giving passengers a safe and comfortable bird's-eye view of London.
Lying out in the Solent, hoping to do sufficient flying hours to make an appearance at Farnborough, the Princess flying boat is boarded by her pilot, Captain Tyson, and revved up. Now for the taxiing trials, which must precede the actual maiden flight. That'll come later. But hello, what's happening? She's taking off. Evidently, Geoffrey Tyson's so pleased with her performance along the water that he's putting her into the air without more ado. And there she goes. 10 engines, 140 tons. It all goes to show that you can be a big bird and still be graceful. After covering about 120 miles over Southampton water at 240 knots, yes, all very nautical, the flying boat gently taxis home again. She proved quite a honey, says test pilot Tyson, and the crew certainly give every impression of having enjoyed the flip also. The Howard Hughes flying boat has a wing spread of 320 feet, and that gives you some idea of its size. Howard Hughes himself checked the controls before the first tests were carried out at Long Beach, California. It's a 200-ton machine, laid out something like a ship inside with 2 decks and accommodation for 700 people. There'd been so much controversy about this flying boat, the biggest aircraft ever built, that her tests made headline news in the States. She's cost $25 million, 18 government millions, 7 millions of Hughes's money, and there was a congressional inquiry into the matter. Now Hughes is at the controls as the 8 engines roar and the ship gets going. He remembers how, at the Senate hearing, he made this dramatic declaration.
I've put the sweat of my life into this thing. I have my reputation rolled up in it. And I have stated several times that if it's a failure, I'll probably leave this country and never come back, and I mean it.
These tests now being carried out were intended to be no more than runs on the surface. Presently, Hughes opened her up, apparently just to find out if it felt as if she would lift from the water. Then, as one of our cameramen was filming the scene, Hughes evidently changed his mind and decided on a takeoff. He flew her just above the water for about a mile, and I'll bet that gave the millionaire pilot one of the biggest thrills in a lifetime full of thrilling adventures.
"25 years old. Not very aged when we consider the lengthy traditions of our other 2 services, but what a lot has been crammed into that brief life. What a wealth of service has been rendered by the Royal Air Force in those 25 years. Already our airmen have established Britain's supremacy in the skies. Already, having played a big part in winning one world war, they're playing a bigger part than ever in winning this one. How short a time it seems since these early fighting planes first hit the headlines of the world's press. Incidentally, these last war pictures have been preserved by the Imperial War Museum. As for the men, first of the Royal Flying Corps and Royal Naval Air Service, and later of the new Unified Air Command, the RAF, they haven't changed, except in their newer technique. The keenness and the courage with which they established our air supremacy in 1918 was the same as that which is establishing our supremacy now. Cooperation with the Army was their chief work then, and the fame of many of those early pilots is remembered today. Billy Bishop, VC, for example. And coastal patrols. How different that short seaplane is from its mighty modern counterpart, the Sunderland. How insignificant those bombs look compared with today's 8,000-pounders. But the purpose was the same, and the courage was the same. When the last war ended, our superiority over the Germans was overwhelming. In 1918, we had over 22,000 aircraft, including a first-line strength of more than 3,000. That was the first period of the RAF's predominance. With peace, of course, came a drastic curtailment of RAF strength. The Royal Air Force, under Lord Trenchard's lead, concentrated on quality of men and aircraft to compensate for the lack of numbers which the political mentality of that time ordained. For most of us at home, the work of the RAF was typified by the Hendon pageants. Year by year, we traced the technical development of the RAF by the new aerobatics, by the new planes on show. The last pageant was held in 1937, and only a year earlier we'd had a first glimpse of some of the types which were to play so large a part in the early stages of this war. The Wellington, still in action on most of the world's battlefronts, the Whitley, destined to pay several visits to Berlin, Cam's Hurricane, and Mitchell's immortal Spitfire. The Schneider Trophy was won outright in 1931 by the high-speed flight in planes which formed the basis of our present fighter design. This achievement, as well as the other records which the RAF collected, proved that research had gone on uninterrupted and that Britain's planes were still the best in the world. Meanwhile, ominous events had been taking shape in Germany. The Luftwaffe had been created, and as the war clouds gathered, pictures of Hitler's mighty air force came in thick and fast, formidable by weight of numbers alone. Then came war. The RAF went to France. Hopelessly outnumbered, they fought back gamely as the tide of German triumph spread. Holland, Belgium, France, Dunkirk. At last, the Air Force had a chance. Outnumbered, but not outclassed, they played a big part in the successful evacuation. In spite of early restrictions, names crept into the news. They were the air aces of this war. First came Cobber Kane of New Zealand, and later, of course, Paddy Finucane, both worthy successors to Bishop, McCulloch, and Ball, as were Stamford Tuck of the Burma Squadron, and Mungo Park, and later the hero of the Augsburg raid, Nettleton, to mention but a very few. But the big trial of strength was yet to come. When it did, the Nazis had a second taste of RAF quality. That's why they lost the Battle of Britain. Quality, certainly not quantity. But today the story is different. Quantity has once again been added to our undisputed superiority of men and machines. Overwhelming forces of Bomber Command hit the enemy where it hurts most. By night over industrial centers and in daring low-level attacks by day. No longer need our fighters concentrate on defending our own shores. They sweep over the channel, beating the enemy from his own skies and shooting up ground targets. Mustangs of Army Cooperation Command, too, are on the offensive, smashing up fortifications and destroying communications. And at the same time, Coastal Command carries out its unspectacular duties, convoy protection and anti-U-boat patrols, to mention only two. On all the world's battlefronts, the RAF has shown its mettle. In the Far East, in Russia, and in the Middle East, where Army cooperation has reached a new peak to which the 8th Army's successes bear witness. Yes, the RAF has gone a long way since that other war. Then, as now, our fighters ruled the skies, clearing the air and enabling our bombers to deal the enemy increasingly severe blows. Our bombers carried out their deadly work then, as now, whatever the difficulties, whatever the odds. Then, as now, Royal Air Force personnel was the finest in the world. Unmatched in courage and endurance, skill and keenness, they won imperishable fame. The names on their battle honors ranged from Russia to the desert, from the Battle of Britain to the Battle of the Atlantic. Per ardua ad astra, through endeavor to the stars. That's the RAF's motto, a motto that has inspired them in 2 wars, a motto that will continue to inspire them long after this war is a matter for history books, long after the war has been won.
There are a lot of people who say that bombing can never win a war. Well, my answer to that is that it has never been tried yet, and we shall see.
Air Marshal Harris has promised Germany a tremendous, unprecedented, non-stop bombing. The Prime Minister, too, has told them what they may expect, city by city. And this, the Lancaster, is one of the principal means by which those promises will be made good. That prospect is as clear as the bomb aimer's view of his target over Germany, or as clear as this view of Britain from a Lancaster coming into land after a raid. Hats and coats go aloft out of harm's way at factories where they build the Lancaster, and I can tell you they're building plenty and building them fast. Every single worker, man or woman, realizes that the RAF is depending on them for Lancasters, and still more Lancasters. Angela Roberts, a capstan operator, knows this and works away harder than ever. But that goes for them all. Maisie Rafferty at a press. Little Billy drilling. Or Dobson Hind and his mate, Joan Evans, riveting, all out for the bombing of Germany's war production centers. Trimming and hammering, Alice Warburton, Rachel Strong. Jimmy Garnett, an all-in wrestler in his spare time, at a heavy capstan. City by city, thinks he, and the RAF has made a pretty good start. Just a beginning, we're told.
Nothing to what the Germans must expect.
A terrible prospect indeed, the colossal hammer blows that are most certainly going to fall upon Germany, city by city. Lancasters. More and more Lancasters. Squadron leader Nettleton, who won his VC in a Lancaster, pays a visit to the factory where his aircraft was made, together with comrades of that daringly successful daylight swoop on Augsburg. They wanted to meet the people who made their Lancasters, to thank them for the quality of their craftsmanship. The VC had a word with lots of them, with Laura Bailey, for instance, and with Kay Mitchell, a clear case of hero worship. Amy Norbury, it seems, draws her inspiration from film style. With it, he struck hard, right at the heart of the enemy. Nettleton went right round the factory, missing nothing. The automatic lathe at work, a masterpiece of ingenuity with a brain of its own, a robot needing no human attendant, yet with one obsession, to hurry on with the building of Lancasters. He inspected fuselage sections. He saw Amy McGrath and Harold Friend at work on a bomb floor. He saw spot welding, featuring a reflection. In the final nose assembly bay, Tommy Oddy, Les Rowland, a fitter, and electrician Jack Carroll. And he saw that the work was good, that Lancasters are coming along very fast. A magnificent bomber, a real triumph of design and workmanship. With 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin or Bristol Hercules engines, it has a speed of 300 miles an hour, it has a range of 3,000 miles, it has a bomb load of 8 tons, more than twice the load of a Liberator, itself one of America's best bombers. The Lancaster's design, moreover, lends itself to rapid production and to ease of maintenance and repair. Important items these in view of the plans made for the bombing of Germany. At the moment, the Lancaster is the finest heavy bomber operated by the United Nations. We know it's the best in the world, and we believe it's a weapon with a great destiny in the winning of this war. That's the Lancaster, as seen by our cameramen, the brothers Wyand and Jack Ramsden. Final studies of the great bomber in flight were made by Jack Cotter, also of Movietone. Beautiful aerial studies of the latest and most devastating addition to Britain's new giants. A strong American bomber force, scheduled to increase rapidly in strength, has now been established in Britain. And Hitler, for all his threats of reprisals, knows perfectly well that not only is the RAF growing more and more powerful, but more and more American bombs may be expected to arrive with those delivered by our own boys. Here are the first pictures released of the opening of the American air offensive based on the United Kingdom. Those crews on wheels are going to the briefing.
We've been doing a great deal of very hard work, and I know how eager everybody's been to get on an actual operation. It's here. We're going to work.
And it wasn't long before they were off to their objective in occupied France. A general went with them. Thrilling moments, the few minutes just before the takeoff for an operational flight. Good bombers, the American flying fortresses, though we've all been familiar for a long time with that nickname of the B-17,
we've naturally been more excited by our own new heavy bombers. But now the fortress, in its new, improved form, has got down to work over here. Its wings, like those of the Stirling and Lancaster, cast a menacing shadow over Hitler's hopes of winning. These shots, taken from a fortress on the way to the target area and over it, were made by a sergeant cameraman. He had a grand time getting new angles on the rest of his formation, and he had fun, too, recording the accuracy of the bombardiers later on. After the bombs have struck home, the smoke drifting away across the landscape carries with it one more enemy hope, the hope of hiding his industrial war effort out of harm's way. These American Army airmen had quite a lively passage at times. A good deal of flak came up, and at least one fortress was hit. Smoke's coming from the engine, but the plane got home safely, as did all the rest, in spite of flak and fighters. General Spaatz, CNC, 8th American Army Air Force, was at the station to welcome General Acre, who soon lit up what you might call a Churchill.
Today is the first time the American heavy bombers have been in action in this theater, manned by American crews and American squadrons. General Acre, commanding the Bomber Command, led this flight, and he may like to say a few words.
Yes, our target was a marshalling yard and a roundhouse for the repair of locomotives. A very large one and a very important one to the German effort.
And the interrogation officer had an interesting time while crews told him lurid details of their successful daylight raid.
Yes, we got a pretty good burst in our left wing, and looks like some shrapnel in our tail surface.
Nobody in the crew?
Horizontal tail. No, no one was injured.
Nobody hit. Well, as near as you could tell, did all the boys get into the target?
Practically all the bombs hit somewhere on the target, and the main bunch of them hit right where they were supposed to.
Somebody had the right idea. Those bombs are certainly something to start with. The United States not only have every intention of giving the Hun plenty to go on with, in company with the RAF, they're going to continue handing out more than he can take. Let no one imagine that recent victories in the Pacific indicate a walkover. The Japanese continue to fight back with a fanaticism quite unknown in the West, and they've combined their latest V-weapon with the national glorification of suicide in battle. One type of plane is a small rocket-driven machine launched from a larger aircraft and flown by a kamikaze, or suicide pilot. He has no parachute, he's locked in his cockpit, the plane has no landing gear, and it detonates with a huge explosion on contact. From Okinawa come the first pictures of this weapon called the Baka bomb. It carries 2,000 pounds of explosive in its nose. Kamikaze pilots are the elite of the Jap Air Force, most of them between 18 and 20 years old. Trained to die by suicide in battle, they are lionized after completing their training course, and special prayers are said for them. As their days are numbered and they know it, they're allowed a last glorious fling with the very best geisha girls, and their pictures are in all the papers for their national heroes in advance. Wearing ceremonial robes, with heads almost completely shaved, they march through the streets receiving the most profound honor from the people everywhere. Then they're ready for their last, inevitably fatal flight. It means death for them, but it may spell a triumph for the Emperor, so banzai! And now, for the first time, the United States Navy has released films of kamikaze pilots in action. You'll have read a lot about them in the papers. This is it. That one nearly got a destroyer. Here, a Japanese V pilot has ended his career with a direct hit on a carrier of the Essex class. He's caused casualties and damage on board an enemy ship, and it's for just that purpose that his own life was written off from the first day of his training. In this action, the sky seemed full of suicide planes. Even when they were hit, they still came on. Their losses, of course, are 100%, and a very big proportion are killed without scoring any success. Oh yes, it's a costly weapon, but the Japanese hold life cheap, and some kamikaze pilots do get their targets. Here, the famous carrier Bunker Hill has been hit. Fires are spreading among the planes on board. The flight deck is like an inferno, but the crew fights for the life of the ship, while men who've been blown overboard are being rescued. A cruiser has come alongside to help in fighting the fires. At any moment, if the flames reach fuel tanks or ammunition, fresh explosions may add to the crisis. Air attacks, mostly by suicide pilots, sank 33 ships and damaged over 50 in the Okinawa campaign. But when this film was made, not one battleship, fast cruiser or carrier had been sunk by them. Here again, saved like the Franklin by the devotion of her crew, the Bunker Hill survived the attack after fighting fires for 8 hours and with the loss of hundreds of men. In addition to the special danger of suicide pilots, the Allies in the Pacific are also encountering all the more orthodox methods of attack. 60 miles off the coast of Japan, an American carrier force was dive-bombed by Jap land-based aircraft. In this case, no serious damage was done to the task force, but Jap losses were heavy, and as you'll see, some were pretty spectacular. Pictures like these show clearly how the Jap is fighting back. American and British servicemen out there know all about it, of course, but everyone in Britain should know too. So far, we've only seen the results of enemy attacks, but the many dangers inherent in carrier warfare mustn't be overlooked. Landing on is just one of them. An American plane landing on loses its emergency tank. There goes the tank, it bursts into flames, but the pilot is safe. That's the emergency tank that caused the trouble. And now another pilot escapes from a very tight corner. With his plane enveloped in flame and smoke, he seems at first to be dead or unconscious. But he too is rescued from what at one moment appeared to be almost certain death. Pictures to remember, just in case anyone tells you that from now on, the Jap war is nothing to worry about. road to Japan and to the liquidation of Japanese cruelty and greed is marked with suffering and death. In 2 months off Okinawa and the Jap homeland, American naval casualties totaled over 4,000 wounded and over 4,000 missing or killed. These are facts to note and pictures to bear in mind. For Japan cannot be smashed except by the skill, the courage and the sacrifice of Allied fighting men by land, air and sea. After much testing and tuning up, after long waiting for suitable weather, Gloucester Meteor 4 and the darker-coloured Britannia were all ready to attack the world airspeed record. Mr. Eric Greenwood, Chief Gloucester Test Pilot, was flying Meteor 4. Both planes were to make 4 runs along the 3-kilometre course at about 200 feet. Here are 2 of Greenwood's runs. After scientific checking, his mean speed was given as 603 miles an hour. Landing at Manston, Greenwood was thought to have secured the world record. Everyone concerned was duly elated, including Margaret Woodfield, the wife who's been acting as secretary and valet to the 2 pilots. Britannia was being flown by Group Captain Wilson, and as we know, his speed was finally given as the fastest yet. Incidentally, you may have noticed that planes are now approaching the speed of sound. You scarcely hear them till they're alongside. Wilson's average for 4 runs was 606, a big advance on the last official world record set by Germany in 1939 at 469 miles an hour. But I don't suppose it will stop at 606. As for the pilots, their speed in the air is only excelled by their modesty on the ground.
Well, Willie, now we've got the corrected speeds, I'd like to be the first to congratulate on a marvellous show.
I think it's rather unfair, the amount of publicity the pilots are getting over this. And really, it should be given to the team behind the machines. And I would particularly like to mention the RAF team, who've been so good at producing the aircraft on time and keeping them serviceable. Well, Eric, I would like to say thanks very much for your congratulations. And here's the time when we meet again on some further flight.
Good show. Right ahead, Willie.
For the Royal Air Force's famous Red Arrows, an anniversary touchdown. For 10 years, they've been acclaimed the finest aerobatic team in the world. But aerobatics as a spectacle really began more than 50 years ago, even before these Hawker Harts took off from Hendon Aerodrome in the balmy summer of 1931. Then the Harts were considered the fastest bombers in the world. The Hawker Furies show how aerobatics were done pre-war. You may well ask, pre-what war? The ancient biplanes do look flimsy, all paper, string and glue, but they were tougher than they looked, and they knew a thing or two about the spectacular. By the time RAF Meteors took the aerial stage in 1950, the war had accelerated technology. Propellers were on the way up. Now it was the whistling jet. But 9 years later, aerobatics as a serious scientific pursuit took shape with the coming of the Black Arrows team of Hawker hunters. Aerial display continued to be the province of the Royal Air Force, as it remains today. But aerobatics were by now tuned to jet speeds and jet maneuverability. The display is sophisticated, like bomb burst. the English Electric Lightnings of the Firebirds, another successful display team of 1963. The birth of the Red Arrows was getting closer. Then in April 1965, the Red Arrows, the RAF's first full-time display team, was born. To the uninitiated, the controls of the Hawker Siddeley Gnat look bewildering. This is the plane they picked. Even pre-flight drill is perfect. Up to this moment, there had been many other RAF aerobatic teams, but the personnel were drawn from operational squadrons. The serious business of defense came first. Aerobatics and fun flying was very much a secondary role. But from April '65, the Red Arrow's sole task was to learn, perfect, and present display flying. The aircraft for the job were as carefully chosen as the men who were to fly them. The Hawker Siddeley Gnat was considered and proved to be ideal. It has carried the Red Arrows to better and more intricate performances year by year in every sky throughout the world. The Red Arrows year begins with 5 months solid rehearsal before the first display. As they take a turn over Blackpool Sands and round the familiar tower, the Red Arrows slip smoothly into one of their most popular formations, Super Concorde. Then the Vigan formation. Precision in the tight routines comes with perfect teamwork and practice. Here, follow my leader is literally the clue to success. 8 Red Arrows follow squadron leader Dickie Duckett's lead plane.
Their aircraft an extension of his.
And a good old-fashioned loop. Don't watch the planes, watch the horizon. A formation they called Diamond 9. Rate of climb is a scorching 165 feet a second. Screaming in low over the airfield, that's precision flying of the highest order. The almost feline grace of these machines alone is exciting. Powered by a Bristol Siddeley Orpheus turbojet, the Gnat has been a faithful and dependable friend of these Knights of the Air for every moment of their 10 years of triumph. Display flying has come a long way since the rickety days of a wing and a press, and it obviously has more exciting horizons to conquer. Here's wishing the Red Arrows, those 9 magnificent young men and the ground crew who keep them flying, another successful decade of breathtaking aerobatics.